So that really leads to the next question. What role has self-learning and extensive computational research played in the advancement of AI, not just in complex games, but in real life? I mean, we're talking about the difference between AI that only pulls data out of a previously created set versus AI that can then go learn on its own, which is two different things. I mean, that's the difference between, for me, AI and ASI, right? Because you have the super intelligence.
Or AGI, basically.
Or AGI, yeah. So what do you think about that?
I think it's probably a step away from AGI. I think the self-learning is an aspect. Let's call it more of a strategy, right? Okay. So all of these different things, retrieval augmented generation, vector databasing, it's a good question. I would say
where would he get the information? Because you and I get the information from sensory input.
Yeah, but
Taste,
we do have
smell,
that.
Sight.
We do have that iterative approach where we have consequences, and so our loop comes from action, consequence, learning, and recycle, right?
The laws of physics, basically.
Yeah.
For every action, there is a similar and equal reaction.
And there's the world we live in, right?
We're an opposite.
That's just how it works. But with AI, I think that the self-learning approach is really more of a let's call it self-augmentation, I would say, more than self-learning, because you're using basically either one or multiple data sets. You're running something, right? Some sort of a let's call it a directive, right? And getting the output, ranking it, and running it again, right? As many times as you want to, so to speak, right? And seeing, and at some level that starts to decay, right? And at some level you get a really good, outcome. So ChatGPT actually does this, where you ask it a question, right? It's going to generate 2 or 3 different answers and rank itself and give you the best 1 or 2, right? And then ask you out of these 2, which is the best, right? And so
you're helping augment its learning, its information, by responding. This answer was better suited to the question that I was asking.
And then the more feedback you have, the more you can tune the model to reflect that, right?
Interesting.
And I'm trying to
so it's not running around like the robot in iRobot and petting the cat and
at least not yet.
Yeah, so because that's really what people are scared of, right? Isn't talking about being protectionist, right? Protecting the human race. Yeah. Some people are scared that we're moving towards a matrix. And I don't really want to delve into that because that's science fiction, but so we're not there yet. That's the statement. A human can go outside and see a leaf, identify that based on previous learning that that's a leaf, but what they'll know about the leaf now is they grab it, they touch it, they see, oh, it's cold, it's crunchy. Yeah. We're in the fall.
Yeah, timing.
Right? So now I'm able to, but based on my previous learning, I'm able to then extend my own learning through my sensory input, whereas AI is not there yet.
Not quite. It will be as soon as we give it more and more inputs, right? More sensory. So a great example I heard of recently, there was I think it was a DARPA presentation where they actually had, basically, they hooked up the computer vision AI, right, to then the LLM AI and put it on basically a human's face, let's say, right? And the whole goal is to have the two work together in that fashion.
To sync up?
Yeah, where you can say, okay, what am I looking at? Okay, I'm looking at a car, right? I have this tool in my hand, right? That sort of thing.
This is how it feels. This is what I do with it.
Yeah, and this is exactly. And so let's feed that into the LLM, right? And see, what should we do with this scene?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, let's grab a 10 millimeter socket.
Yeah.
Great, we have that. Next cycle. Okay, let's put it up there. Let's unscrew it. Right, that kind of thing. I think we're probably 2 to 3 years out from that kind of thing being like.
That's close.
It is.
2 to 3 years is nothing. And so I guess in dovetailing directly off that, you look at now the speech recognition that is involved in this and the evolution of it in AI research. And what does that signify for the broader trend? I mean, we already have deep fakes where you can, on your phone, there are apps where you can speak like anybody. I could be whoever,
Sean
Connery
Connery.
was like, I'm the last one.
Yep.
Draco is my name, right?
Yep.
And so you could be anybody, which means that you could, in theory, call a kid that's 10 years old at school and say, hey, this is daddy. I'm going to have so-and-so come pick you up. And that child will not be able to tell a difference between. So how does that work in the evolution of that?
Right? I think it's scary, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
I think it's going to come down to there are going to have to be some regulations in place, right? I think no one wants to say
the government
that we
involved?
want. Yeah, of course not, right? I mean, who wants to say, let's have another step in making AI even harder. But I think it's going to be necessary because if there isn't consequences for having deep fakes available in the first place to be maliciously used, right? I think that's where that's at least step one.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's obviously going to be technology that goes out without a human, backer, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
It's anonymously released or whatever, and you can run it and do your thing.
Yeah. Like torrent files used to be.
Yeah, but with AI, you still have to have the compute. You still have to know a little bit about setting up these environments, and I mean, it's not.
There's going to be fingerprints.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a plug in a USB and here you go. At least not yet, right?
Could it be a civilian oversight, though? Couldn't it be that it's a civilian? Because this is a worldwide. This is not a country issue. So you see, like, for instance, the EU constantly stepping in on certain things.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the political side of it because there's so much to talk about. The U.S. steps in almost as much as the EU. But I think people are leery about the government getting involved because the government, as Ronald Reagan said, tends to be the problem and not the solution. Not everybody agrees with that, but generally the government's going to muck things up rather than make it better. So maybe civilian oversight?
I think so. This leads me to a point I said the other day is I think AI is ultimately dangerous when people trust AI more than people. So who do we trust more? An AI, and now civilian oversight is people. I love it, but can you regulate everything that way? I don't think that, at scale, how would you keep up with that, right? There's already departments in the government, that don't quite
agencies. The agencies, the FDA.
They're not quite as quick at doing their job as maybe they should be or that they could be. And so, I think the challenge is we're going to end up with AI regulating AI. And
how we regulate is a matter of what we look at, right?
Yeah.
And who is determining the regulation.
Yeah.
So moving on to which two techniques in AI do you think have shown the potential to scale effectively with increased computational resources? So which ones are the most effective for scaling?
Well, I think some of the techniques like retrieval augmented generation, having the...
For those that are listening, that's RAG.
So what that does, just to... so we're talking about the model and the corpus,
That's
right? Now, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, basically enables you to have some smaller corpus than the model that you feed into the model to enhance the model.
But that's bifurcated. It's almost siloed out,
They're
right?
completely siloed out, right? And so what that enables is a much, if we didn't have that, there would be so much less AI right now because most AI implementations are using a retrieval augmented generation setup to let's call it fine-tune the AI. Now, there's a difference between fine-tuning a model and what I'm talking about here, but it achieves the same outcome basically with different accuracies and all that. But basically, you can take like a Llama 2, right? Have a proprietary corpus of say Top Gear phrases or something, right? And basically feed it into that and say, what would James May say about this situation, right? And it'll come up with something that's pretty accurate, right?
And dead on to what you're asking, right? Yep. This is the situation I gave you, and this is going to be a relatively accurate response, responding to that situation.
And I think what that enables the most is lowering costs, right? We don't have to retrain a model and all the compute that comes with doing that. You can also take a model, replace it with another one as things go on. And I think that is the...
You're talking about the engine, right?
Yeah.
The engine that's using the corpus to respond to whatever is being.
Because a lot of times that corpus is your business IP, your proprietary processes, information, data, all of that.
Yeah.
So one, you don't want that to go to some third party where they're retraining their models on that.
I don't.
Yeah, no. The other thing is that obviously using new models as they come around, right? I mean, every year we're probably going to have some new, well, every month there's a new model really at
right
this
now
point that's open source. Yeah, and I think that it's going to, I think it'll probably slow down a little bit as things, you know.
There's always the curve.
Yeah.
Newness, everything goes up, everybody's doing it, and then eventually people don't get bored, but the intelligence level gets thinner, right? So you don't have people that are smart enough to best whatever already came out. And so it's the person that is able to move that process forward. Maybe intelligence level is the wrong.
I think maybe a lot of it comes down to the equation for these larger businesses. So Meta, give them a lot of credit. You know, they basically created Llama, put it out there, and now there's a ton of AI use cases just off Llama alone, right? Well, what is the equation for them? Right? Why would they do that? I think that right now it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, there's a ton of reasons they do it, but over time, you know, it's going to be a little bit of a different equation as costs change, as expectations change, as regulations change, right? So I think that in back to the question in terms of scale, being able to swap out models is key.
So the core and having the corpus that's set and then those siloed parts allows you to stick another. It's like taking a car and then putting another engine in it, right?
Absolutely.
As long as it'll line up with the chassis and line up with the drivetrain and all that, then you can put another engine. You might have to expand the size of the interior of the area for the block and stuff like that, but you can put a new motor in it and it will run, right? So that's what you're talking about, is just putting a new motor in the car so that you can continue to do it and maybe more efficiently. That's awesome. So I guess coming back to how should AI begin to adapt to address the complexities of human cognition and the external environment. And I think we were talking about the leaf, and you touch it and you crunch it and then you realize, so how should it maybe morph?
Well, I think that's going to change over time, right? I think that right now, even when we're talking about morphing a model, right? It's basically a fancy way of saying that we've done the math in a way that accurately reflects the true data set. And so the math changes a lot. How you end up with those vectors, you can tweak it. There's so many different ways to end up with this, and then there's new stuff coming out all the time. And
new technologies.
I'd say new algorithms, new ways of applying statistics into AI to have better learning and outcomes, and for better costs and all of that. So right now, I think that. I'm sorry, back to your question, because I'll go down the rabbit hole otherwise.
Come on, Alice, let's stay this way.
I think that I don't think it's completely sure how it should morph yet. I think that there's a consensus that it should do it as safely as possible.
Yeah.
But I think the more compute that we end up with, the better those costs end up with. I think that small business will end up having a more direct say in how these models morph is a strange word, but how they adapt, how they get better, right? Right now, how they evolve. Great, I
Evolution.
love it. Yeah. But right now, it's kind of up to the bigger companies, right? The ones that are doing all of
they have the money,
core research, and they've got the people, and absolutely.
So that's a really good that leads right into the next question that I have, and that's how can AI technologies be integrated now into existing business processes to improve efficiency and reduce costs? And that includes small business, right? Because small business is 90% of what employs 90% of the people in this country and around the world. Small business, we're not even as small business as a lot of countries. For instance, where I grew up in Mexico, you had a tienda de abarrotes in every corner. Like everybody opened up their garage and started selling, candy and fruit and sugar. And so they're even smaller business entrepreneurs, right? So not looking at the micro businesses, but looking at least the small businesses to medium size who may not have the army of engineers and technologists and just have a smaller budget. How is this going to help them?
Well, there's still a lot of room to grow. One of the things we're doing at TetraCore is making a better foundation for all organizations, small businesses and on up, to have a core foundation that is integral to their everything in their business. All the data they're tracking, all the operations, everything. Who's in their organization, all of it.
So it's not just generative. It's not just giving you responses. It's doing more than that.
Yeah, so we're taking the approach of the AI add-on, right? So we're not an AI core. We provide basically an objects-oriented, let's call it a data layer, right? Data lake. Ecosystem that, enables you to work on different workflows and processes and forms and all that stuff, but then feed that into an LLM and gain the
closed
benefits. Yes.
Right? So then your data isn't being sent off.
No, we're running that all of ourselves.
1,000 people in India.
Yeah, not at all. And everything's segmented and all of that.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing that we've stumbled upon is instead of feeding, let's call it text, into these LLMs, we're giving it more of an objective approach where we know that based on an object, here's the relationships that object has, right? Yeah. All the way down to whatever layer the root ends up being, right? And so we've over 5 years come up with the fastest iteration of being able to get recursive dependencies and feed them into
recursive dependencies,
meaning if A depends on B and B depends on C and C depends on D, A should probably depend on D, right?
Or at least it should know that.
It should, yeah.
And it should go back and forward, correct?
Yeah, and it should do it quickly and without thought. So a lot of systems right now, you end up having to do a lot of extra steps in order to present your data that way and then stringify it, so to speak, make it text for then an LLM to work with. Yeah. And what we're doing is giving it that approach to be able to do operational AI, be able to do things that let's call it another perception, the perception of the
object.
The object and the objects around it, right? And so if we
the vectors,
if we have our world around us and we basically we do live in a 3D vector space, right? We're providing those vectors in the form of objects.
That's right.
And so we've gotten a lot of really good outcomes from that because we're not just using text.
And we have a specific example of that in that we have the tech company that I started, which is Alcanza, and we provide, as you know, because you've helped build the stack. Build the platform on the stack, right? That it provides affordable immigration services where people can do it on their own, but it's guided by AI and they have access in their own language, all kinds of stuff. So it's not theory, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. It's working. It's tried and true. We're on version 6 now at this point, and that's the version we're going to release here. Hopefully by January 1 to the public, right? Yeah.
And then obviously when you release it, when you say release it, you're talking about TetraCore. And I think the question that everybody else would have that I have is, what does that look like? How do you get access to that?
Well, it's going to be an open beta for a couple months while we get feedback from different organizations in different industries, right? Obviously, we've been working with organizations like yours and different government and entities and organizations building their businesses on TetraCore. So we've been able to utilize that to get the best outcomes that we've had because a lot of companies they just go from 0 to 1 and they release and it's like, okay, we have no idea how this is going to perform. And to be honest, we've done that and we've done it many times to the point where we've gotten a 10 to 100x iteration improvement on every every time. But where we really we're gonna make it available on tetracore.com. January 1 is our target date. Yeah, we want to launch a couple other companies first, right?
Yeah. We're working on it.
Yeah.
It's going well.
Yeah,
so
we're so
January
close.
1, beta, right?
Yeah.
And then that way people will be able to start to get into it, start to give it, and provide that feedback loop, right? That, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing. These are issues. But then probably Q2 of 2024, launch it to where, so give us a specific real world example. Let's say I'm a lawyer, right? Which I am a lawyer. But let's say I'm a different lawyer, and I do, I don't know, court case filings. And I have 4 people that all they do is write briefs and write filings and motions, and I give them feedback, and I watch and I do. How would having your own use of Tetracore and the AI that is added to it with a corpus that's built, how would that affect your life?
Well, it would, first of all, give you a basis for improvement constantly. Second of all, it'll give you the intellectual property to have greater value in your business as just as an organization. But it also gives you the non-black box approach to building your own stack on top of Tetracore, right? So what that would look like is you get in, you start to think, okay, I need to track this, and this, right? Let's call it court filings.
Yes.
Court filings, court briefings, etc., right? And you're going to design the data around that. Okay, we need to name it. We need to know the location. We need to know the judge. You know, everything, right? And what we can do then is create an agent, call it
an autonomous agent.
Yeah. Call it whatever you want, right?
Like mine is Leo, legal efficiency operator.
And
Leo.
I love that name, by the way.
Leo.
Yeah. And use that against your ever-growing list of data, so you can have those 4 people who are writing briefs and doing that, but they're going to submit it into the system. Over time,
you build your corpus.
You're building your corpus. It's learning, and you're going to basically then end up with the autonomous agent will have a feedback loop that runs on a schedule. And so as data is being entered in, it's going to ingest and have its learning phase, right? And what we're doing is we've got it at the concept of checkpointing. So you can say, okay, yeah, great, this is approved for production. Keep another version learning while then that one is operating, right? So that you're not updating this production model or corpus at all, or even as the model needs to expand, etc.
Until the schedule hits.
Until it's actually ready to be done.
Which means you can test it internally for a period of time before pushing it out to production.
And a lot of that, sometimes you may end up with different versions of the same autonomous agent with different voices and different directives and different purposes. And so, you might have 20 very small scoped autonomous agents that are very good at that scope, and that we can then over time minimize the cost and make it faster, right?
So what would happen to those 4 people that were writing before? How long would it take, and what would happen to them?
Well, I think that the reinforcement learning is important because you want to have those people on retainer or in your organization to basically grade the responses of the autonomous agent, right? So so that we can improve it, so that it's self-improvement through basically reinforcement learning. And so over time, as you reach a target threshold, say 90% accuracy or 98% accuracy, you can start to get rid of those people, right?
What does that mean? What does that mean for a small business?
Cutting costs.
There you go. Yes. And so then you create efficiencies, right? Because how long did it take that one person to write that 150-page brief?
Quite a while.
It took them a while, right? So they had to spend 5 or 6 days just researching, pulling the case law together, and then they had to spend a couple days writing it, refining it. So now you have a person that just spent 50 hours on a brief. How quickly could a model like this spit out a brief if it's properly trained?
Well, let's call it 30 to 60 seconds.
No. So now we cut. So where if I'm an attorney and I'm like, okay, I have to file a brief with Judge X. It would take me longer to read the brief than to get it created by this system.
Yeah. Now, given you've had the 4 people to write those initially to then train the model, but it's a lot less cost.
What are you talking about? 6 months, a year investment of keeping them on and growing it. And then by that time, you look at atrophy, natural atrophy, because all business has it. Even at my law firm, which I own, I mean, we had 15 people at once, but with all the efficiencies we've built in, we're down to where we have 5 people, but we're doing the same volume of business. And so we've been able to increase our opportunity for profits significantly. Better yet, I've been able to pay my people that are still here much better wages because they have more impact on the business. And that is without all of everything that we're talking about, right? So Leo is just now going into production.
It's an add-on, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so he's adding on, but even with the efficiencies through the system, we've been able to reduce. So I can only imagine that once Leo's in, and this is the big pitch for everyone, is once the autonomous agent is there and is live and is trained, which takes time. Don't get frustrated. It takes time. But once it's there, you not only create additional business IP, which then adds value. Because like, for instance, a small business owner, let's say a law firm with 3 lawyers, and the main personality, the rainmaker, is 1 attorney. That business is not worth very much to other people because if that attorney sells it, that attorney's no longer there. If you were the one bringing in all the business, well, then how are you going to continue bringing in that business? How do I know if I buy your business that I'm going to continue to get that if you're no longer there? Whereas if the system is doing most of the work, then the system is what people look at as, this is where I want to be, because they're using, for instance, in my case, that person's using Alcanza. I want to go there because I can have control. I have direct access to messaging. I can talk to my legal assistant or my local guide or whatever it is.
You've got flexibility.
That's right. Yeah. I can add my documents directly. They trained me on how to upload from my phone, right? Because I have an app. So it creates differences, and I want that to be big for people listening because Tetracore is changing the world. It's going to change the world. And I'm not going to name any names, like name drop any big companies, but it's going to put some big companies on its name.
Absolutely.
And they don't even know yet. Like, this is all still under the radar. And you guys have done this pretty much without any outside investment, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I basically, to give you my story, we started out as a web design company I'm going to say 12 years ago. Yeah. I started SageCore, and over the period of that time, I created custom systems for businesses across the nation. And